Okay, can we start? Je voudrais parler en français, si ça...
I'd like to speak in French, if you don't mind, for my introduction.
Donc, nous avons
with the Political Affairs Committee, who we welcome this morning, we have a hearing on the issue of prosecuting and punishing the crimes against humanity or even possible genocide committed by Daesh. Now, I'm the author of the motion we're discussing today. A previous version had been put forward by Mr. Omtzigt, but it wasn't approved by the Bureau. So I've taken on this text and amended it. So I am the main author of the motion which we are now discussing. So I'm especially delighted here because I was able to go to Alesh in Iraq, in the part of Iraqi Kurdistan, a few months ago, which is the main place of worship of the Yezidis. And on that occasion, I had an opportunity to meet victims of these crimes of humanity and/or genocide. And the Yezidi community was really taken aback by the war, and they were surrounded in Sinjar, and they weren't able to find any sanctuary. All their places of worship were destroyed, the women were kidnapped, and the men were killed. Now, the women also enslaved. So if you have a chance, you should really visit these areas, especially Alej, because for the Christians, Muslims, atheists, agnostics, or others among us, the Yezidi religion is a very special case, and we are not familiar with it. So before yielding the floor to the rapporteur, I'd like to say that we are facing an extremely delicate issue, which is that of genocide. You know that very few acts of genocide are officially recognized. Yesterday was the official commemoration of the Armenian genocide. I attend that every year in Brussels when I'm present. And not so long ago, on the 7th of April, we had the commemoration of the Tutsi genocide in Rwanda. And, of course, we have the deepest respect for the victims, irrespective of the crime of which you have suffered, whether it's a victim of genocide or war crimes or crimes against humanity. There's not much difference. But we must be extremely cautious in how we describe, how we qualify genocide, because, of course, there is a trend to hype certain crimes, and we're seeing more and more war crimes and crimes against humanity being described as crimes of genocide. And weighing my words here, and the aim of our mission, of our meeting here, is to hear from victims and their representatives, and also from the lawyers, the legal experts, so that we can make some headway towards how we categorize or classify genocide for the crimes against the Yezidis. Now, I give the floor to Mr. Jensen to say a few words, and then to our rapporteur.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. And I would just briefly like to thank our colleagues in the Legal Affairs Committee for taking the initiative to this joint hearing. I think we all realize that the fight against terrorism and not least the fight against Daesh is one of the most important subjects to be discussed in these days. We unfortunately have seen all too close to this meeting still terrorist attacks going on in Europe, and certain killings also taking place around the world, organized by Daesh. So this is, I think, a very important topic. And as the colleagues from our committee will know, we are working on a report on how to stop the funding of the terrorist group of Daesh. We have always also recently had a joint meeting with the Commonwealth of Independent States on how to fight terrorism generally, as well as we are working on how to help and protect the victims of terrorism. So this is a very good opportunity to discuss how to continue our work in this important field. And once again, I thank the Legal Affairs Committee, and we are looking very much forward to the hearing.
Thank you very much, colleague. Mr. Omtzigt, the rapporteur, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Both chairpersons today. Dear colleagues, I'm very glad we can devote the remainder of the meeting to a very important issue. Our committee has many issues on the agenda, both of our committees have, and we only have very limited time this week. Still, it's very important that we pay so much attention to the prosecution of Daesh, ISIS. The people of Syria and Iraq have suffered so much for so long. First, on the murderous tyrants like Saddam Hussein or Bashar al-Assad, and from long drawn-out conflicts of all kinds. Yet, even in these countries, the crimes of Daesh are exceptionally horrific and barbarous. These crimes have so far gone largely unpunished. And at present, there is no, I repeat, no effective mechanism or process to ensure that there will be punishment. This is a disgrace, but it can be changed. I hope that our committee, followed by the Assembly, will help make this change happen. The stated aim of Daesh is to establish a caliphate under the rule of its leader al-Baghdadi, not only in Syria and Iraq, but throughout the whole Muslim world. This twisted, evil view has driven Daesh barbarism. Mass murder, brutal extrajudicial execution, torture, rape, sexual enslavement, child abuse, mass expulsions, destruction of cultural heritage and religious monuments. I could continue. The catalogue of crimes covers every offense under international crimes and humanitarian law. I dare ask you, tell me one offense they haven't done. Numerous sources, including the UN Independent International Commission of Inquiry in the Syrian Arab Republic, have repeatedly confirmed this. And Daesh has committed genocide, perhaps the worst crimes of all. The atrocities it has committed against Yazidis, Christians and Shia Muslims were committed because their victims were Yazidi, they were Christian, or they were Shia Muslim. They were committed with the specific intent to destroy those communities, in whole or in part. The definition of genocide set out in the 1948 Genocide Convention is clearly and fully satisfied. The UN Syria inquiry was for a long time quite rightly prudent in its assessment. Eventually, after careful consideration of the huge volume of evidence it had gathered, it concluded that Daesh's acts should be qualified as genocide. This Assembly, along with the European Parliament, as well as national parliaments and governments throughout Europe and North America, have come to the same conclusion. I do not really know why the motion that launched my report was a bit equivocal on the issue, despite the previous stance of the Assembly in an adopted motion. Whatever the reasons may have been, my own position is clear, and I will call upon the Assembly once again to support it. And it's just not a matter of public rhetoric, let that be clear. Once states recognize that Daesh has committed genocide, they become obliged under the Genocide Convention itself to take positive action to prevent and punish it. This could make all the difference in bringing Daesh to justice. I will not go into the technicalities of how Daesh could be prosecuted for its crimes, or the individual fighters. The legal issues and arguments are set out in my introductory memorandum and will be addressed by our invited speaker. And to the people watching this, the introductory memorandum has just been declassified and will be put on the internet. The speakers, first and foremost, include Nadia Mourat. We know her as a very worthy recipient of the Assembly's 2016 Václav Havel Human Rights Award. She has suffered firsthand what it means to live and be abused by Daesh. And I think it's very courageous that she wants to tell about this. It's not easy. Geoffrey Robertson, QC, the human rights advocate who presided over the UN tribunal in Sierra Leone, and Ewelina Ochab, an independent legal researcher specializing in Daesh, who was visited the affected area itself. Thank you for your participation, and I give the floor, I think, to the chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Omtzigt. So, Madame Mourat, can you hear us? Can you hear us? I would like to start with you. You have been already introduced, and I give you the floor. Please, it's very important, of course, that we have time for question and discussion, so I would like to ask you to keep your comment to a maximum of 10 minutes. Madame, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I apologize for not being able to attend. Since the 3rd of August 2014 until now, genocide continues against Yazidis and other minorities. What happened to the Yazidis in 2014 until now continues. Rape, human trafficking. More than 40% of the Yazidi areas in Sinjar are under the rule of Daesh. There are more than 45 mass graves that stand witness to this, and they have not been visited until now. In Mosul, we were hoping that hundreds of Yazidis will be liberated in Mosul. However, unfortunately, only 30 women Yazidis were liberated. The more the military forces advanced, the more Daesh would take Yazidi women to Syria. There are children also that have been brainwashed, and they are in Syria. 2 Yazidi children last month committed a suicide attack in Mosul after they were brainwashed. The genocide continues against the Yazidis. As Yazidi victims, on a daily basis, we give testimonies to the crimes committed by ISIS, by Daesh, to the Security Council, to the European Union, to the Arabs, everywhere. We have given testimony, but until now, very little has changed. Very little has changed for the Yazidis. Daesh continues to destroy these small communities like the Yazidis and Christians and other minorities. If no action is taken by the international community, then Daesh will achieve its objective and destroy the Yazidis and Christians and other minorities. Today, we feel that we are getting lost, that we are completely destroyed. The genocide continues. There are more than 300,000 Yazidis who are displaced in Kurdistan in Iraq. There are thousands of Yazidis who have immigrated to Europe, and thousands are in refugee camps in Greece, Turkey, and Syria. Thousands have also entered Germany. I would like to thank Australia for accepting hundreds of refugees, and we thank the Canadian government also for receiving many survivors. I would also like to thank the government who came to Kurdistan, to Iraq, the government of Germany, who gave us refuge here in Germany. And through this program, through being here, I managed to speak at the Security Council, and in many countries, more than 23 countries, I managed to make sure that this message reaches them through testimonies. I work with Amal Clooney, international lawyer, in this struggle. However, not one single member of Daesh has been taken to court. We asked the Iraqi government to help us to hold Daesh accountable. However, Iraq, until this point, is silent on this issue, on prosecuting Daesh. Daesh has not been prosecuted until now. I am one of the survivors. I lost many members of my family. I lost my life as a young woman. We are raped and sold, and these crimes continue until this day. Women, young girls are raped, are sold. In the past few days, some of these girls were freed, and now when they present their testimonies, we find that the same crimes that were committed in the first days 3 years ago are still being committed now. Until this day, the women are raped, are sold. Nothing has changed. Very little has changed up till now. Thank you for inviting me to speak, and thank you for allowing me to share with you my experience.
Thank you very much, Madam. And of course, you stay with us for questions later. The next speaker is Madam Ewelina Ochab. She's a legal researcher, a PhD scholar in the University of Kent in the United Kingdom. You have the floor, Madam.
Thank you. I would like to thank the committees for organizing this event, and of course, I would like to thank as well Mr. Pieter Omtzigt for the memorandum and the report that he's going to prepare as well. When discussing the atrocities committed by Daesh, we cannot be afraid to use the word genocide. Genocide has a clear legal definition, and as already mentioned by Mr. Pieter Omtzigt, the definition is in Article 2 of the 1948 Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. And genocide consists of various atrocities that are perpetrated with the specific intent to destroy the protected groups, whether national, ethnic, racial, or religious, in whole or in part. And this is precisely what Daesh is doing in Syria and Iraq, specifically targeting religious minorities for destruction, in its aim to destroy religious pluralism in the region and establish a purely Islamic state. And this genocide has been recognized by international institutions and states, including the Council of Europe, European Parliament, US State Department, the UK House of Commons, and the parliaments of Canada, Australia, and France. And we mark the first anniversaries since the recognition by various international institutions and states of this genocide committed by Daesh against Christians, Yazidis, and other religious minorities. And here it is crucial to examine the progress made or not made over the past year in relation to this recognition. More importantly, we must assess whether this recognition of genocide has made any difference in the lives of the victims. In general, the debates whether this is genocide or not must come to an end. We must know by now from the case of Armenian genocide that this is not the way forward. One cannot fight for over 100 years to have the recognition made, and especially not when this genocide is still ongoing, and actions must follow. However, the recognition of the genocide by international institutions and states has not achieved much over the past year. Promises have gone unfulfilled, and there is a complete lack of will to prosecute those who have committed genocidal atrocities. As we speak today, people continue to suffer under the hands of Daesh. Women and girls are being raped, enslaved, and forced into years of sexual abuse. Boys have been forced to fight for Daesh or killed for refusing to do so. People are being beheaded, tortured, and those who are not in prison are still displaced. The point of recognizing genocide is to prioritize the victims and to work towards alleviating their suffering through the prevention of more atrocities and the provision of aid to those in need. And legal steps to bring the perpetrators to justice are crucial too. And there is not much interest in the fates of the victims. The question is why. Is it because most of the atrocities are taking place in Syria and Iraq, out of sight, out of mind? However, the Daesh atrocities are not unfamiliar to Europe. Even Europe has experienced what Daesh is capable of. Attacks in France, Belgium, Germany, Sweden, and the UK are the tragic reminders that the problem of Daesh is not of Daesh atrocities is not a problem of the Middle East exclusively. And this is still just a tip of an iceberg of what is still to come. As Daesh is losing territories in Syria and Iraq, it is expected that many of the Daesh fighters who survive will eventually return to their home countries. And this is a serious threat, as in 2016, the number of the Daesh foreign fighters has been assessed at over 30,000. It has been reported by Sofan Group that over 5,000 of the foreign fighters were from European countries, with 3,700 only coming from 4 countries, the UK, Belgium, France, and Germany. And the current rates of the Daesh foreign fighters returnees are between 20 and 30%. So even if we look only at the numbers in Europe, it means that between 1,000 and 1,500 of the foreign fighters will return to Europe. And this is, of course, a serious threat to peace and security in Europe. First, those Daesh fighters, returnees, may conduct atrocities on the return to their native countries or participate in the radicalization and training of the new fighters. Secondly, fighters who have committed genocidal atrocities, including systematic beheadings, rape, sexual violence, and sexual enslavement, may be able to pass without notice back into society, continuing to commit crimes on the return and avoid prosecution for the crimes committed abroad. So, of course, the question is, what will happen after they return? Will they be brought to justice? And if so, how? Will they be brought to justice on charges of genocide, crimes against humanity, or charges of terrorism and other related crimes? Will they be brought to justice at domestic courts or international tribunals? And these are all valid questions that need to be taken into consideration when discussing the bringing of Daesh perpetrators to justice. However, any such consideration must start with the question whether there's enough evidence to initiate prosecutions. And while the evidence is being collected by a number of NGOs in Syria and Iraq, there is no coordination of those efforts. And some steps are also being taken at the United Nations level. And on 21st December 2016, the UN General Assembly passed a resolution which sets up a new mechanism for Syria to collect the evidence of atrocities committed in Syria. But of course, the mechanism will obtain evidence of atrocities perpetrated by all actors, and Daesh is only a small part of that inquiry. So for any future prosecutions, it would be worth considering also separating the prosecution of Daesh fighters from prosecution of other actors in Syria. In relation to the Daesh atrocities in Iraq, on 19th September 2016, the UK Foreign Secretary, alongside the foreign ministers from Belgium and Iraq, launched a global campaign to bring the Daesh perpetrators in Iraq to justice. The international coalition has not indicated how it will bring Daesh perpetrators to justice. And the coalition relies on the initiative from the Iraqi government. And as Nadia already mentioned, the Iraqi government is still not indicating how to proceed. However, at this stage, it is crucial to at least start collecting the evidence, because without this evidence, any future proceedings are at risk of failing. And it is also crucial that the perpetrators will be prosecuted for genocide or attempted genocide, and not for only lesser crimes. While I have heard from a number of states that they are under no obligation to recognize this genocide, my question is, how will you secure justice for the victims? How will you secure justice for the victims without recognizing this genocide? And most importantly, how will you fulfill your obligations under the 1948 Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, namely prosecuting the acts of genocide, if you refuse to recognize it as genocide? The legal response to the atrocities perpetrated by Daesh must be adequate. It is not the first incident of genocide that we witness in our lifetime. It is not that there is no legacy to follow. And it is true that some of the routes will be expensive or will take a long time. However, we cannot justify the ongoing impunity for genocide, crimes against humanity, or war crimes. We have already failed at preventing the atrocities from occurring. We cannot fail at prosecuting too. And there are a number of different options how to proceed, just following the legacy of previous responses to the genocidal atrocities. One option would be for the International Criminal Court to investigate the atrocities and to prosecute the perpetrators. However, the International Criminal Court doesn't have the territorial jurisdiction over Syria and Iraq, unless, of course, Syria and Iraq accept voluntarily the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court, or the UN Security Council refers the situation in Syria and Iraq to the International Criminal Court. But, of course, that's very problematic. The prosecutor of the International Criminal Court could also exercise her personal jurisdiction over the so-called Daesh foreign fighters. However, this is also not an easy route. Nonetheless, the legacy of the genocidal atrocities, of the response of the genocidal atrocities, is very rich. And the responses have a few elements in common. And first, the evidence has to be obtained, preserved, and prepared for any future prosecutions. And this is, as already mentioned, a crucial step because the evidence disappears every day. And second, there must be some kind of tribunal that would prosecute the perpetrators for the involvement and complicity in genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes. This could be an international tribunal, as in the case of Rwanda or Yugoslavia, a more regional option, or a UN-supported national court. However, it is crucial that any such tribunal or court would not only focus on the leaders or the perpetrators, but also on the complicitous actors. So all complicitous actors that help to fund the atrocities, help to spread the propaganda, help to train the fighters. We cannot forget about those complicitous actors too. Without them, this genocide would not be as successful as it is. And those steps are crucial to bring the perpetrators to justice, perpetrators from Syria and Iraq, as well as the foreign fighters. While the recognition of genocide is important for the pursuit of international justice, the first priority when reacting to genocide should be to assist the victims of such atrocities. This means addressing their needs for security, accommodation, food, emotional support, medical treatment. Only then can the perpetrators be brought to justice through the proper recording of testimonies. And only then can society start to reconcile. However, it is also crucial to emphasize that justice in court is elementary. So justice in court is crucial to combat impunity. It is crucial for victims to start the process of reconciliation. And it is important to us all as well, to restore our faith in the international community. So justice in court sends a message that crimes like genocide will not be tolerated. One cannot annihilate or attempt to annihilate whole communities and escape responsibility. Not in the 21st century. Not on our watch. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam. The last speaker is Mr. Geoffrey Robertson. So he's the author of Crimes Against Humanity, The Struggle for Global Justice, and he's the former president of the Special UN War Crimes Court in Sierra Leone. Mr. Robertson.
It's a great pleasure and indeed a privilege, Mr. Chairman, to address the Assembly today and to comment on the excellent report by Pieter Omtzigt and on the crimes against humanity committed by ISIS or Daesh, if you prefer. They don't. It doesn't, let me say at the beginning that there is no doubt in my mind as a former judge that genocide is being committed, has been, will be continually committed against the Yezidi people, 400,000 of them. I'm less certain about the genocide in relation to the Christian community, which is in certain respects tolerated, or Shia Muslims. But of the Yezidis, the reasons I will explain, there can be no doubt. Crimes against humanity, of course, are being committed against the Christians and the Muslims, Christians and the Shia Muslims. Now, it is not only genocide that is being committed, the worst of all crimes against humanity, it is slavery. We are really back in a slave situation. These people are selling Yezidi women 2, 3, 4 times. They're being treated as chattels. The legal property in Yezidi women is transferred to one ISIS member after another. This is monstrous. We thought the British Navy had ended slavery in the 19th century. We have conventions in 1925 and 1956 that all your countries have signed up to. And yet, here, slavery exists and is being promoted as part of the ISIS program. Now, this is taking place in full view. There's no doubt about these crimes against humanity. You can see them on the television. You can see them on Facebook. How is it that the world allows it to happen after a genocide convention in which every European country has signed up to and accepted obligations in Article 6, either to have them prosecuted where the genocide is being committed? Iraq won't prosecute them because it wants the death penalty and wants to kill them. And Syria, of course, will not prosecute them. So the alternative, and the only alternative, is an international penal tribunal which Article 6 obliges the signatories to the Genocide Convention to set up. And that need not be a United Nations tribunal. The United Nations is poleaxed. The Security Council cannot act because Russia, obsessed with its access to the Mediterranean from Syrian ports, will veto everything that puts any kind of rug under Assad. There is no doubt that the Russian veto will come down. Now, there's a legal problem with the reference to the ICC because you refer a situation, you refer a country situation to the ICC, and the minute the Security Council refers the situation in Syria to the ICC, then it can prosecute Assad for chemical weapons. So that's why Russia will veto, China possibly as well, any action by the Security Council. The ICC, the Security Council, is simply poleaxed, useless, letting down the world. The General Assembly stepped up to the plate in December, but all it has done is set up an investigatory committee. There are lots of investigatory committees. They haven't even appointed a head of it yet, and that's 4 months later. It will no doubt collect evidence. It's there to be collected, but it will not prosecute anyone. So we can rule that out. The ICC prosecutor has said that she won't act. So who is to act? Who is to accept and undertake the promises that the Genocide Convention back in 1948 made? Is there nothing to be done? Because nothing will be done unless the European Parliament steps up to the plate and sets up a court. There is nothing in the TEU that prevents it from setting up a European Criminal Court, and it has a duty because so many, as you've heard, so many of the foreign fighters, many of them holding senior positions in Daesh, are from Europe, are from your countries, and that imposes, in my view, an obligation to set up. The European Parliament has the power to set up a Europe-wide, or at least 29 countries-wide, criminal court. Of course, in certain countries of Europe, there are plans to prosecute returned foreign fighters, but in other countries, they're dealt with in other ways, by programs to try to reintegrate them, not always successfully. There needs to be a Europe-wide court, criminal court, that prosecutes for genocide. Now, that, I think, is the big idea that I've come here to discuss, and I'm happy to talk about. I set up with others the court in Sierra Leone, which was somewhat successful. Charles Taylor is now in prison in Britain. But there is nothing in law to stop European countries honouring their obligation by setting up a criminal court for genocide, for slavery, an international crime, and crimes against humanity. So why is it genocide? Genocide means an intention to destroy part of a race for religious or political reasons. Policy of ISIS is to hate the Yezidis because of their pagan, as it terms it, religion. It's part Zoroastrian, it's a little bit of Jewish and Christian and Muslim influences. But they are hated and they are destroyed. This is the way they're destroyed. The able-bodied men are put either killed, for the most part, you see the videos of them being executed, or they're put in work camps, just as the Ottomans did with the Armenians that we recalled yesterday. That's the first, get rid of the able-bodied men. The women and girls over 12, are sold into slavery. They are made the legal property of those who purchase them, very often for on sale. They're actually slave markets that these people hold, and they are sold, and frequently 4 or 5 times. That destroys them as Yezidis. It makes them, in the law of the Caliphate, Sunni Muslims. And as for the young boys are converted forcibly to Sunni religion, and they're trained as fighters, often as suicide bombers. So there you have, in my view, a complete indictment, and a good indictment, for genocide, as I said, and complicity in genocide. And every member of Daesh knows this policy, helps to carry it out, is complicit at least, and complicity in genocide is specifically made a crime by the Genocide Convention, which every country of Europe has signed up to, including, so has America, thanks to Michael Moore pointing out that Ronald Reagan had visited the Nazi graves in Bitburg in 1986. Reagan ratified the Genocide Convention. The USSR ratified it, and Russia takes on its obligations, and so has China. So there you have Article 6 of the Genocide Convention requires a court either in Iraq or Syria, you won't get that, or punishment by such international penal tribunal as may have jurisdiction. And there is nothing to stop the European Parliament setting up such a tribunal. Because, as I've said, the Security Council is poleaxed and will never do so. The General Assembly won't go beyond collection of evidence. The ICC prosecutor, for reasons that are too complicated to go into, will not prosecute. It's Europe or nothing. It's the European Parliament or nothing. So it seems to me that the reasons for setting up, the European Union setting up such a trial, such a court, is firstly, it's to fulfill, the only way your obligations under the Genocide Convention, Article 6, can be fulfilled. Secondly, it is a duty because so many thousands of Daesh fighters come from Europe. They're your people, and you must punish them, or at least arrange for them to be punished. The 5 reasons I'll quickly give to support the idea of a European criminal court for genocide, slavery, and crimes against humanity. Firstly, that it will set a standard, it will be a beacon, it will show the world that genocide will not be tolerated, that at least one region of the world has acted to punish those of its members and others who it's captured for this worst of all crimes. and that seems to me an overriding duty. Secondly, because it will produce a historical record. Courts do this because the cross-examination tests the witnesses, and so at the end of the day, you will have an imperishable record, of accurate record. It won't just be allegations by NGOs. It will be a test tried and tested. And Europe has the prosecutors, it has the judges. A lot of work is being done in Germany. I think Germany is the leading country on investigating the crimes. So whether the court is set up at The Hague, which has plenty of experience of courts, or whether it's set up in a German city, it doesn't matter. It will be the European Genocide Court. Thirdly, imprisonment. I think this is important because Iraq is so unhelpful, because it wants to kill. The possibility of reformation, the fact that no death sentences will be passed, will itself be greatly symbolic. Fourthly, having a court will deter. It could act as a deterrent to some of our young people flocking to join the fight for the caliphate that involves the commission of genocide. So it will have a deterrent function. And finally, fifthly, as was mentioned, the victims. It is there for the victims to tell the victims that they are not alone, that somewhere in the civilized world, the center of the civilized world, their sufferings are understood to be the worst of all possible crimes that cannot be allowed to continue without punishment. Compensation could be possible, but I think the very recognition that what they have been inflicted with is the worst of possible crimes, and that the perpetrators will have a form of punishment, will be some solace to the victims. So for those 5 reasons, I do think it incumbent on this Parliament to do something, because you have the power, you've signed the documents. What's happened to your promises? Do something. You can do something, and you're the only group that can.
Merci beaucoup pour ce...
Thank you very much for that very powerful advocacy with a very precise indication that we need to discuss a European court to pursue crimes of genocide and similar crimes. Now, we have to be quick. We'll have a quick list of speakers. Mr. Ilalouf, I'll give you the floor first of all, then Mr. Scriver. Lord Anderson, please go ahead.
Je m'appelle Elalouf.
Well, my name is Elalouf. I'm from the Israeli parliamentary delegation. I'm a parliamentarian in the Knesset. The 2 eminent reports we've just heard bear moving testimony to the genocide, and we see Europe failing to shoulder its responsibilities. We're in a period when genocide is actually taking place, and nothing is being done to halt this genocide, or not enough. I live in a region and in a country with an Arab population and a Jewish and Christian Muslim populations where Daesh has no hold, and that's no accident. It's because there are actions taken to avoid this. Even if some of our borders with Jordan, for example, even with Syria, are such that they are impenetrable for Daesh. So I think when it comes to talking only about the legal aspects, it's important now, in addition to setting up a court, which can't be done now, what's important now is to stop Daesh from enrolling people, recruiting people, young people who are reckless or maybe aware of what they're doing. And we had this wonderful lady Yezidi, giving us a very clear description of this dreadful situation which the world is not addressing. We're already talking about genocide. So I think we need to react and ensure that a halt is put to it immediately.
I'd like to raise your attention. We are in a hearing procedure. Please ask questions to the three panelists. We'll have plenty of time to discuss the report of Mr. Omtzigt in the future. So now we are here to address questions to the speaker. And please be brief, and if you want to ask a question, we're going to close the list, so this is the last chance. Mr. Schreber.
Thank you very much. Indeed, very interesting presentations, certainly also in combination. I feel very much appealed by the plea of Geoffrey Robertson to establish a European criminal court. However, it may also raise some eyebrows in other parts of Europe and in the world as such. So he mentioned basically it should be an initiative of the European Parliament, the European Union. Very soon we will miss the United Kingdom. The European Union has very little experience in this particular field with criminal courts. So you could also mention the Council of Europe or the OSCE. And secondly, also to the excellent researcher, I would like to pose the question, how do you view the feasibility of the alternative avenue of national jurisdictions, exercising in a way universal jurisdiction? Thank you.
We have 6 more speakers. The list is closed, so be brief. Yes, Mr. Corin.
Yes, Chairman. Titus Corlețean, member of the Assembly on behalf of Romania. Before the question, nevertheless, I would like to thank both committees, the rapporteur for organizing the hearing, the speakers, and especially for the Yezidi's testimonies that simply is telling us that we should do much more and in a much direct and committed way from a political point of view. Now, this draft report, and I thank the rapporteur, is briefly or essentially raising 2 main issues, challenges, the political challenge and the legal challenge. My feeling, after having also our national experience from this point of view, I have launched a number of years ago on behalf of my country, Romania, at that time, in a different capacity within the General Assembly of the United Nations, the idea of having an international court against terrorism. It advanced partially because of a number of obstacles, and we still hope that it will become a reality, not for tomorrow, dealing inter alia also with the genocide, but it will be not for tomorrow. Since then, and this is the point addressed to the rapporteur. Definitely, I read the content of the draft report. I think one of the main issues should be addressed to the member states of the Council of Europe. We're not speaking about the European Parliament. The EU is much broader, and it's good to be much broader region and political space, Council of Europe, to take a decision, political decision within the legal order and the national order to recognize what is happening as a genocide committed by Daesh, and to offer also a legal foundation for the national courts, and to support a broader political decision within the international arena to fight against Daesh in terms of genocide committed. So we should do more on the national basis, and I appreciate the idea of the report in supporting the member states in advancing in this direction. Thank you.
Lord Anderson.
Chairman, 2 powerful presentations, but I am a little troubled by the generality of Geoffrey Robertson's contention that all members of Daesh are complicit in genocide. I was thinking when he said that of the 3 idealistic young women who went from East London to be Yezidi brides, presumably now in Raqqa, some way from the place where the genocide is taking place. And I'm not sure that public opinion would say that people of that sort are guilty of genocide. So what are the principles in drawing the line between those on the fringes and those who are directly involved.
Thank you. Mr. Divina.
Grazie, Presidente.
Yes, thank you, Chair. A very direct question to Mr. Robertson.
Effettivamente noi proveniamo da sistemi giuridici
Yes, indeed, we come from legal systems which very strongly anchor civil rights, but we need certain evidence. Now, I understand the difficulties post hoc to find concluding evidence for each individual atrocity committed by Daesh. But my question is, a European Criminal Court, in your opinion, could it initially bring about a kind of generic incrimination of Daesh? Daesh was a terrorist organization that's committed serious crimes against humanity, genocide, and it's reduced people to slavery. So an initial condemnation of the organization. And secondly, whoever has a right to this, whoever claims to its organization would also have to bear the same guilt. Surely that's the end of my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to all the guests for being here. In particular, I'd like to thank Ms. Nadia Mourat for being here and for her testimony. I would like to ask Ms. Mourat, firstly, what is it that you would like to see that the international community could do better for the victims, in particular, in light of the comments that we've had from the experts here? Would you feel that a European court could in some way remedy or mitigate the crimes that are going on in terms of them, criminals fearing prosecution, really? And secondly, I would like to ask Mr. Robertson if he believes that there are lessons to be drawn by former courts, former international courts. I take, for example, the Court for Sierra Leone, but also the International Criminal Court for the former Yugoslavia, as well as the ICC, which has had some of them at least have faced criticism in terms of how they've treated the victims of crimes and their sort of representations at these kinds of tribunals. So are there specific lessons you feel that should be drawn from the way that previous tribunals have treated their victims that a potential European court should utilize? Thank you.
Also a very short question for Mr. Robertson. Well, the ICC, the International Criminal Court, is only 10 years old and is still very, very weak. Don't you fear that setting up a specific European criminal court will weaken the ICC? And also, we have already many problems with African countries which sees the ICC as, a former colonial instrument or domination by Europe. And so I think that there is a risk that this court would be badly perceived by some African country, for example. So let's give you the floor first, Madame Mourat, please. Please go ahead. Can you listen to me, Madame Mourat?
We don't have sound.
Okay. So sorry, but she doesn't seem to listen. Yeah. Okay, please.
Yes, I can hear you. Yes. 3 years we've been working with the Security Council to set up a tribunal for those who committed this genocide, but we did not get anywhere. We did not see any serious steps taken towards establishing a court. To have a European Criminal Court will be the beginning for achieving justice for thousands of victims. It will be the first step on the path towards justice. If you do not have this court, if you do not set up this court, I ask you to pressure the Security Council to establish such a court, such a tribunal.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam. Madam Ochab.
First of all, in relation to the comment made by the Israeli delegation, I totally agree. We are here, of course, to talk about prosecution and any attempts to prosecute the perpetrators for this genocide, and we did not really cover the topic of prevention, and that's for one main reason. We already failed at preventing the atrocities from escalating to genocide, and hence we are trying to respond to the current stance. However, we have to take steps to ensure that any future atrocities are stopped at an early stage and to prevent the atrocities from escalating to genocide. So that's definitely very important, and we still are failing at that. And of course, the current genocide in the Middle East, it's not the only incident of genocide that is ongoing. So definitely there is a lot that have to be learned and that have to be changed.
Yeah. Could I add, just before we end, that I don't see it as a problem or any form of weakening of the International Criminal Court, which has been attacked because it's Africa-centric. Well, Syria and Iraq are not in Africa, and I don't think that there will be any structural, any opposition or any downside for the International Criminal Court in having a European criminal court concentrating on prosecuting those Europeans who fought with Daesh and those captured on the battlefield, because there is universal jurisdiction. There has been universal jurisdiction allowed us to intercept slave traders a century ago, 2 centuries ago, and it allows us to prosecute. I don't think the question about generality that Lord Anderson asked, there is a crime of complicity with genocide, and if 3 ignorant British women want to say they had no idea what Daesh was doing when they volunteered, well, their defense will be put forward and they will be acquitted if they make it out. But the Charles Taylor case is very important on complicity with genocide. He didn't go near the atrocities in Sierra Leone, but he read about them in the newspaper, and that was why he knew that the support he was given to the RUF was going to atrocities. So that's not a problem. It is the question of complicity with genocide and a fair trial. And of course, once this court gets going, it will be impossible for anyone in Europe, given the publicity, to say they didn't know what was happening. I don't think, of course, international justice is in its very early stage. It took us 50 years to even think about giving some meaning to the Nuremberg legacy. I think the ICTY has been reasonably successful. The Sierra Court faced, of course, there is a problem of expense, there is a problem of delay, and we're getting around these problems. We're learning how to cope, and I think those lessons have been learnt. So, of course, it will raise eyebrows. That's the whole point. It will raise eyebrows in Aleppo and Homs and all sorts of places, and that's why you have a court. One of the purposes of criminal justice is to deter, and that will, I hope, be one of the purposes that the European Criminal Court will serve, because we're not going to get an international court. The Security Council is hopelessly poleaxed. China objects on principle. Russia objects because it sees it in national interest to support Assad in every way. So we're not going to get an international court from the United Nations. We can get an international court from the European Parliament. We can't get it from anyone else, anywhere else.
Thank you. So the final words for both Mr. Omtzigt and the chair of the political committee, if you wish. Mr. Omtzigt first, and then...
Well, first and foremost, thank you very much for being here, and the greatest thanks goes to Nadia Mourat for having fought for 3 years right now and seeing on a daily basis what's still happening to Yezidi girls, to Yezidi men who are being murdered, and that we're still not doing anything. I think it's very important to take home that 5,000 of these people are from European countries, 3,700 from those 4 countries alone. This is not a Syrian problem, that's a problem of our own society that somehow breeds people who then go somewhere else to be at least complicit. Lord Anderson put out that there may be 3 innocent young girls among them, but there are also hundreds of young, able-bodied men from our countries who participate in these atrocities themselves. And in case you wouldn't care about Syria and Iraq, something I could not imagine, you might care about your own countries, where these people come back. And if you want to punish people for driving 5 miles too fast on a motorway, please stop talking about reintegrating these fighters and start thinking about how to prosecute them and to really punish them. If we have a rule of law, that is the only way forward. And I will fast-track this report and make sure you have one by June. There is no time that we can waste any longer.
Thank you. As chair, we will help you in the fast-track process. Thanks. Mr. Jensen?
Thank you, Mr. Omtzigt, and thank you, dear colleagues, and not at least thank you to our guests for your contribution for our work with this very particular and very important subject. Thank you very much altogether.